indicated that there came a time when Anthony Sowell moved into this house. It was testified by Lori Frazier that this was sometime in the summer of 2005. She testified that she met him, they hit it off right away, and moved in either immediately or shortly thereafter with Anthony Sowell. She would stay with him for the better part of 2 years, ladies and gentlemen. She came into this relationship with a drug problem, left the relationship trying to get away from the drug problem, and Anthony Sowell, she testified that Sowell came into this relationship at that time not actively involved in drugs, but the end of the relationship would be heavily involved in drugs. So basically two people going in opposite directions. Lori stated that when I first met this guy, life in the world of drugs, if two people are on drugs, this relationship is never going to last. And eventually that's where the train would meet, where they both had concurring drug problems, and then that relationship would deteriorate. But a very, very important relationship in Anthony Sowell's life. And again, her middle name is Annette. He would often refer to her as Annette. She verified the fact that Sergerna Sowell got sick. She left, went to the hospital, never came back. She also testified that her mom died. Her mom died on March 6th of 2007. And that was a kind of a wake-up call for Lori Frazier in her life to maybe take a personal inventory and assessment as to which direction she's going in her life. And she decided that, it's time. Maybe the time has come for me to get off of this vicious drug cycle. Drug addiction. We heard a lot about drug addiction in this case, a lot. And I think you've learned by now that crack cocaine and what have you does not discriminate. Drugs do not discriminate. Whether you're in the lower socioeconomic status of society or whether you climb the ladder to, for instance, just a week or two ago you had Betty Ford, who was the former First Lady, President of the United States, First Lady, who had a drug abuse problem. So it hits everybody, ladies and gentlemen, and just clicking your heels and hoping to say that this drug abuse problem goes away doesn't necessarily work for everybody. It's a long way back to beating it. Some people can, some people don't. And as we get into this case, you'll learn about the struggles of many of the women who had drug abuse problems, but perhaps didn't have the resources like a Betty Ford clinic or something like that, where you can go and be an inpatient and beat the demons of drug addiction. But this was a turbulent relationship between her and Anthony Sowell. I mean, she cared about the guy, and there's no question he cared about her. But it wasn't going to work. She made a decision that perhaps she should go. She moved out of that house, but she did not lose contact with Mr. Sowell. That was quite clear. She would still have a lot of contact with him, but not on a day-by-day basis where she is living with him. At one point in time, she was in jail. He would come and visit her in jail. I think she picked up some charges in the year 2008. She talked about one time when Anthony invited her over to the house. Come on over to the house, Christmas time. I have a Christmas tree. I have a Christmas tree for you. Come home. But she never did come home. And as we get down the road a little bit, we talk about Gladys Wade in December of 2008 when she was dragged up to the room. What did she see, ladies and gentlemen? She saw a Christmas tree. So again, hoping that this love of his life, so to speak, would come home, but she never did, and eventually would fester and bring out some very ugly things in Anthony Sowell. All right, but so she was a significant person in his life. You heard her testify. She testified that she pretty much stopped living there sometime in 2007. Sometime in 2007. And why is that important? Why is that important? Because the first victim in this case, Christo Dozier, went missing sometime in the summer of 2007. And if I remember the testimony of Lori Frazier correct, she testified that she knew Christo Dozier. They went to school together. And what happens here? Lori moves out, and one of her best friends disappears. What did we learn about Christo Dozier? You heard from her mother, Florence Bray, and two of her children, Antonia Dozier and Anthony Dozier. Florence Bray, the mother, testified that she last spoke to her daughter on May 17th of 2007. It was on the phone. Christo, at the time, was living in a street in this Mount Pleasant area with a guy by the name of Louis Murphy. We learned that Christo was a mother of 7, that she became addicted to drugs at a young age. After she disappeared sometime in May of 2007, the family would put flyers all over the neighborhood. But these, as soon as they would put them up, they'd pretty much disappear. And they looked for her for the better part of 2.5 years. That Christo's stomping ground as far as drug activity was somewhere in the neighborhood of East 116th Street. Her daughter, Antonia, testified that the last time she saw her mother in person was Mother's Day of 2007. You heard from her son, Anthony. Anthony was coming home on furlough from the Marines in April of 2007. Saw her around back then, but when he got out in June, there's no Christo. File police reports, whatever. He would look and scour the streets for over the next 2 years in search of his mother, to no avail. But Christo Dozier disappeared sometime in the summer of 2007. Which leads us to another woman by the name of Shanna Carver. This young lady was about 30 years old. You heard from members of her family. You heard from a Yvonne Williams McNeil, the mother of Tashana, and you heard from her sister Latanya. And what did we learn from them? That for a significant period of time, they had a house on Imperial. Basically, if you know where the beverage store is, if you just keep going east, about 5 houses on the same side of the street would be a house that at one time or another was occupied by Latanya Irby, a sister to Tonya Carver, and by Shanna Carver herself. Miss Williams McNeil last saw Tashana at the Imperial House, she said sometime in March of 2008. 2008. Likewise, Tashana had a problem with drugs. There was no secret to anybody. She had a boyfriend by the name of Carl Johnson that I don't think family members were too thrilled about, but he lived in Akron and lived with them for a while, came back, lived on Imperial, then decided to perhaps move back with them. This kind of irked her sister, Latanya Irby, to some extent. So In fact, she got into it with her sister, Shanna, and sometime around March of 2008, it was Latanya's impression that her sister was going to move back to Akron with this guy by the name of Carl Johnson. But we know that that's not, she never made it there. Again, a problem with crack cocaine. So this young lady, again, ladies and gentlemen, disappeared sometime in the spring of 2008. Never to be heard from again. All right. Which takes us to another young lady by the name of LaShonda Long, who also disappeared sometime in the summer of 2008. We heard from Mr. Jim Allen, the father of LaShonda Long. LaShonda was perhaps maybe the youngest of all the victims, 24 or 25 years of age when she went missing. Again, no denial, no denying that LaShonda had problems with drugs, battling drug addiction. She was a mother of 3 children. Mr. Allen testified that daughter was living in the area of 123rd and Kinsman. She was petite, said under 5 feet. Even her mom, even to that day, had problems with drug addiction and would be a person of the streets. But the important thing about this is that the last time Mr. Allen had any contact with his daughter LaShonda was end of April, going into May of 2008. And she would disappear. So sometime in the late spring or early summer of 2008 was the last time anybody heard or saw LaShonda Long, which takes us to the next lady by the name of Vanessa Gay. And Vanessa testified that she knew. Vanessa at the time was very, very heavily into the drug scene. And she knew a couple of these people. She knew Kim Smith, nicknamed Candy, and she knew LaShonda Long, nicknamed Thick. And she testified that she did not see her friend LaShonda, or Thick, during the summer of 2008. And yet, Miss Gay testified that, to the best of her recollection, sometime in the month of September of 2008, she remembers the month as being September because her birthday is in September, that she was in the area of Kinsman Avenue one day looking to get high. She met Anthony Sowell in the Kinsman area around 10 o'clock. He said he had a 50-piece, and she agreed to go back to his place. Once back to the place, had conversations about Anthony's really complaining about his stepmother, didn't care for her. Went up to the 3rd floor, and she was able to describe the 3rd floor in very good detail. You walk down the hallway, there's a bathroom on the left-hand side. To the right of the room, at that time, in September of 2008, was a room with a plastic sheet over the opening. As you walk further down the hallway, there would be a bedroom. Whose bedroom? His bedroom, to the left. She described the room, the dresser on the TV, and looking out the window, you can see the sausage factory out the window. She knew she was able to give a very good description of the third floor of that premises. She sat on the edge of the bed and gave Anthony Sowell a stem, a device used to smoke crack cocaine. Took a hit on it, he took a hit on it, turned around and punched her in the face. And said something to the effect, "Bitch, take your clothes off." And her ordeal would just begin at that point in time. Threatened to throw her in the closet and forget about her. And he went into a rant and a rave about what, ladies and gentlemen? About his ex-girlfriend. Then he calmed down. Then he told her, "You don't deserve what I'm about to do to you." Talked about all the women that did him bad, did him wrong. And he punched her in the face again. Put his penis in her mouth, and he raped her repeatedly. It's getting light outside, she testified. She asked, "Can I use the bathroom? Can I use the bathroom?" So if you leave his room, on the way, just outside his room is the west room, and she's saying, "As I left his room, the plastic that had been draped down over the opening was now pushed back. And I looked in there, and I saw what appeared to be a body tightly wrapped in material sitting on the floor, but it appeared to have no head on it." And keep in mind, ladies and gentlemen, this is September of 2008. And who just went missing a few months earlier? LaShonda Long. And as you know, down the road, you'll learn that LaShonda Long is the head in the bucket in the basement. The timing of her testimony, as far as when it took place and what she observed, is just chilling. The morning, Sowell was all over the place with his thinking, calls his sister up, makes his peace for whatever reason with Vanessa Gay, says he's going to get paid. "You come back on Monday. You come back on Monday, we'll get high all over again." She was allowed to leave again in the middle, at a time in her life she was deeply involved in drugs and basically living on the streets. And she would go spend the next 3 days in an abandoned house. So I'd call the police or something during that period of time, and they want me to come down to the police station. And I've had experiences in the past before with the police. I've been a victim of crimes in the past, and they never paid me no heed or attention. She just didn't really have, ladies and gentlemen, much confidence or faith in the police. She would go on and continue to have her drug problems, and sometime in the February of 2010, when she's in front of another judge in the common pleas courts at a probation violation, just brings it to his attention about the ordeal that she had with Mr. Sowell on the date and time in question. Still in 2008, ladies and gentlemen, and we're hitting into the fall of 2008, and the next person we've got to talk about is a lady by the name of Michelle Mason. To learn a little bit about Michelle Mason, we heard from her mother, Adeline Atterbury, and her sister, Mary Mason. According to them, Michelle had a drug problem that went back many years, but she was battling it, and she seemed to have been winning that battle up until the time she met her death. She at one time moved to New York. When she moved to New York, that's when she acquired a drug problem, came back in the Cleveland area. One time in her life was involved in an incident where she got shot, and she lost her, I believe, her left eye, and she had to get a prosthetic eye to replace it. In October of 2008, she was living in the area of 121st and Buckeye, right in the Mount Pleasant area, ladies and gentlemen. She disappeared. Sometime in 2008, she disappeared. They would go and put flyers up in all the stores, but to no avail. In fact, most of the flyers would come down. I remember the mother, Adeline Atterbury, testifying that she actually went one time to the corner store, that would be the Imperial Beverage store, where she learned from the owner, and she testified that Sowell took down signs in the store when he was purchasing trash bags, But went missing in October of 2008, not to be heard or seen again. We're still in the fall of 2008, ladies and gentlemen, and the next lady we're going to talk about is Tonya Carmichael. The time she went missing, she was roughly 51 years of age and a mother of 3. You heard her mother, Barbara Carmichael, come into court and testify, give us a little information about her. According to Barbara Carmichael, Tonya started using drugs kind of later in her life, when she was about 42 years of age. Hung out in the area of 116th and Kinsman. She said that the last time she saw her daughter was November 10th of 2008. She was driving her boyfriend's truck. She came over to Barbara's house to get money for antifreeze. It was around 4:30 p.m. Maybe a week or so later, they would find this very truck parked in the area of 118th and Kinsman. They too would put up flyers, but Miss Carmichael, after November 10th of 2008, would not be seen or heard from again. Completing the year 2008 takes us to a lady by the name of Gladys Wade. Miss Wade testified that on December 8th of 2008, she was visiting her sister. Miss Wade at the time was living in East Cleveland, was visiting her sister at 149th and Milverton, took the bus to get there. Miss Wade testified that she had a lot of medical issues involving kidneys, kidney stones, and what have you. That on the way over to her sister's house, she soiled her clothing, and she went to her sister's house and got in an argument over a pair of jeans. She needed a change of clothing. Wound up getting a pair of pink jogging shorts or pants from her sister, and she would put her clothing, the soiled clothing, into a bag. She would eventually leave her sister's house and head back toward the area of 116th and Kinsman in order to take a bus, which would be the quickest way of getting back home to East Cleveland. She testified on the way over there, she stopped at the beverage store at 123rd and Imperial. Bought a can of beer and cigarettes and put them inside a plastic bag, and she had $11 on her. And Miss Wade was not shy about what she would do with this $11 once she got back to East Cleveland. She would buy some crack cocaine. When she left the store, she said the defendant was standing outside the store and said Merry Christmas to her, asked her whether she wanted to drink some beer with them. She said she had her own. she proceeded to walk across the street, past Ray's Sausage. When she got to the area of his house, he came up from behind her and grabbed her and pulled her up to the driveway to the side door. She was being choked. Choked. And the next thing she remembers after being choked was being on the third floor. Regained consciousness on the third floor, and she said, "I was in a room with a Christmas tree." She began screaming. Sowell said, "Bitch, take off your clothes," and he punched her. But she fought back. She fought back. And a battle ensued between her and Anthony Sowell, all the way back down the hallway and all the way back down the 3 flights of stairs, to a point where her hand goes through a glass window at the 2nd floor landing. And she's clawing him, and she's fighting for her life. And she winds up outside on the driveway, gets up, and goes across the street to Bess's place. Her right hand is bleeding. And she goes in the place, and they say, "You can't, you're bleeding. This is a restaurant. You can't stay here. Call 911. "Oh no, go outside. There's a phone out there." She says, "Yeah, there's no phone in the cabinet, the container." And she's outside, and who comes across the street? Anthony Sowell, accusing her of robbing him and whatever, and throwing clothing at her and whatever. She was not getting any help whatsoever at that location. She was a virtual stranger to that area. Anthony Sowell obviously knew the various people that were in Bess's chicken place that night. So she left. And somewhere down the road, she flagged down the police. She flagged down the police and gave them a rather detailed account of what took place. And they would take her to the hospital where she would be treated. And the police would go back to his house. And Walker and company, Patrolman Walker, testified that they went up there, they saw a pair of pink clothing in her glass in a trash can, and saw that Anthony Sowell had visible marks on him, and they placed him under arrest. They placed him under arrest on December 8th of 2009. And this is, you can see a picture taken of Gladys Wade on 12/9/08. You can see marks around her neck. She said to the police, she said to the hospital, "This guy was strangling me." You can see marks around her neck. You can see the injury to her right hand as a result of the lacerations she sustained when her hand went through the window. They arrested him that night. She would try to follow up with that, and she learned that they let him go. They let him go. Somebody down there on the Cleveland Police, Cleveland Prosecutor's Office ruled not credible evidence. Not credible evidence, because here's some woman with a crack problem. You wonder about how Vanessa Gay must have felt too, or any women that are in their positions. Nobody wants to believe me just because of my social and economic status in society. I'm not believable.